Hey everybody, it's Master Gallengeist here, bringing you my review for the anime Kengan Ashura on Netflix. And I would not recommend this anime. I really didn't enjoy it and found it kind of boring, and there were just a lot of problems with it. Now, it's not completely done. There's going to be other parts because it stops right in like a portion of this tournament that's supposed to be going on. So it's like, okay, strange place, but all right. They kind of make it at least work cobbled at the end, but this really has the problems of like the story, the characters, and definitely the animation. So let's get into the animation part first because that really sets the tone for everything else and kind of snowballs with the rest of the problems. So, a majority of this is done computer generated CGI 3D animation kind of. Now, normally I don't really have that much of a problem with it, but the issue comes into effect like I reviewed the anime Baki, and at certain aspects they would, for some odd, inexplicable reason, decide to switch to a 3D animated thing that would look janky as fuck and be like, okay, that's weird. This anime has the opposite effect, where the majority of it is done CGI, and then out of no fucking where, certain 2D animation styles would be brought in. And it's like, okay, and there was like no rhyme or reason. It's almost like they needed just something to like get through to have this one thing done, and it's just really weird and janky and really kind of draws you out. You're like, okay, there's going to be no consistent really rhyme or reason for why these things happen. Now, if there is a rhyme or reason for why this happens, say, kind of if you're going and you're effective, at least the anime God Eater, all of the monsters are pretty much CGI. Certain background elements are CGI and the weapons are CGI. It follows a set amount of rules. Now, the quality is what more comes into that question. That also comes into question here because the CGI just gets really kind of weird because it wants to try and elicit these kind of emotional responses. Like, say you see some of the characters like Oma or Yamashita doing these kind of expressions or whatnot, and it just doesn't fit. Now, the voice acting with it works, but when you pair it with the animation and how kind of a natural it kind of gets with the 3D, it just is like, this is kind of weird and really kind of drew me out of what was going on. So, let's get into that effect as we're really kind of going through the problems here. So, character wise, we've got Oma, who's like this badass warrior, and Yamashita, who's a dude who's just useless. Honestly, he's more of a running joke than an actual character, and he only does things that the plot demands kind of happens to him. You don't feel like there's really any agency with him whatsoever. Oma is pretty much one of the central driving kind of plot engines, I will say, and that he's just given the amount that he needs to kind of keep the story going, which gets us to the story. It's just pretty much about. It's got an interesting premise of that it brings in this like Japanese history of how merchants would fight with each other, and like a shogun pretty much being like, hey, stop this shit. And then they just moved in the background and then did underground fighting. And you're like, okay, that's pretty interesting. But damned if this one just didn't take that premise and just went. See, a premise is good on its own, but then you need an interesting world and interesting characters to bring you into that. And these are just kind of characters put in there to like either symbolize fighting styles or just be kind of caricatures and like have almost no depth or whatnot put into them. Now, there is a certain amount of depth, but it's just kind of really shallow. Like, Oma is going for what you think is vengeance for his former master he looked at as a father figure. Going throughout the rest of the anime, you find that this one dude who was the apprentice of the guy who killed that father figure killed his master and wanted that revenge thing on Oma, and Oma didn't give a crap. He just wanted to be strong and everything. Which really gets kind of weird because this dude now becomes his rival and is just really kind of fucking weird and wants to defeat Oma and finally find release. And he was naked and cuddling with a Oma stuffy plushie at one point. At least that's the impression that the scene, I think, was supposed to give. There was a lot of weird shit in this. Like, randomly this chick just comes up and wants Oma to be her husband and make babies. I mean, I understand that they're trying to be like, oh, Oma's such a badass dude. He could just get these women kind of like throwing themselves at him. Never mind that she's like a school age girl and part of essentially like a demon clan. Okay. It's just like the barest minimum, almost kind of like fantasy kind of thing. I'm like, okay, you can kind of have fantastical elements, but they gotta make sense. It's just like, alright, put this shit in there, put that shit in there. It's like, alright. And we get to the fighting, and it's not horrible, but it gets into a really bad predictability because Oma gets introduced as just taking out this one dude. It's like, oh, okay. And ironically enough, the first fight is kind of like the most interesting, but it's still very one-sided for Oma. And that's, of course, Yamashita sees him do this. He's like, oh, holy shit. Then he goes back to his job. He gets called up by the chairman, Mr. Nogi, and gets put into this Kengan Association, which is where all the businesses are now fighting for all of this supremacy across the world. We get Oma going through a couple fights and all of that, and then, of course, Mr. Nogi decides to get another person, uses Yamashita as a pawn to have them initiate this, like, Kengan match, annihilation tournament to try and become the president of the association and become, like, or we don't exactly know if Nogi wants to be named president, but it's definitely heavily hinted at, and I don't expect too many twists and turns with this. And then we kind of start going from there. We get a battle royale part where Oma has to defend this one chick because she accidentally got locked in with them, and then they get on board the boat where, again, more of the shenanigans happen, but it's mainly people trying to do power plays, but it's not really that interesting. Like, we see that the businesses have their competitors, which is like Oma, and they like employ these people to do these things, and you see some stuff fighting throughout to see other people trying to become competitors, but it's narrowed down from like over 100 down to like 32, and then they get to the island and we start seeing the actual matches, and this is where most of the kind of action aspects for the matches start to come into play problematically. Mainly, when you're doing an action anime like this, you want to have an air of unpredictability. After like about one fight or whatnot, you start to figure out it doesn't go as badly as Baki, where you see one person do something and then do an ass pull. It's mainly one person kicks another person's ass, and then they figure out it's about time to reverse it, so that other person kind of kicks the other person's ass, and then they just kind of flip-flop until they get to the determined outcome that they want. And it's just not that engaging to watch. Even seeing people doing different techniques and whatnot isn't that really engrossing or engaging. You're just like, oh, okay, it'll be the back and forth until we find the winner. And you're like, I don't really care that much. There's not really that much stake. I mean, granted, they try and show stakes of like all these companies with these monies and these backroom deals, but it's mainly just showed off. It's mainly shown to us once, and mainly with like Yamashita making a bet with this other company that Oma is fighting their competitor for. It's really weird to kind of explain. I can't. It's watching all these things play out and having no investment whatsoever. Like, you want to be invested in this. You're like, okay, the premise does have promise and potential, but nothing of it is really gone through and like followed through with. I mean, Oma has this like superpower that kicks in that is just heavily teased, but we don't really get much on. It's like, oh, he goes super and like can beat wholesale ass. and that's about it. Now, granted, I understand that it wasn't that many episodes and there's more to come, but I really didn't care about Oma. I really didn't care about Yamashita because, granted, I thought that Yamashita would kind of be our audience entryway, but I just did not like his character whatsoever or anything he did. And granted, we do have kind of plots and intrigues. We see that evidently his son is one of the people in the tournament, but he's a shut-in and has been controlling everything from his room. And the Demon Clan people, for some reason, have a sniper out looking for him. I don't know why. There's all these things happening, and they're just like, okay, I don't really care. And that really sucks because I'm like, you could do all these kind of cool things. You could do all these different techniques, and then you just start kind of seeing certain variations. Like this one character, Lihito, is able to use his fingers to pretty much cut people. Then you kind of see other people using similar variations on those techniques. It's like, okay, but what makes it different from how Lihito does it? It's just not really that much differentiated. I'm like, all right. It's not like seeing something like Dragon Ball or My Hero Academia where you see these people having all these different kind of techniques, like Vegeta having Final Flash, Goku's Kamehameha, Midoriya using One for All, or Bakugo using his explosive sweat and everything. It just, I don't know. It was really just not that engaging. And I wouldn't recommend this to, I mean, granted, there's gore, but there's really no stakes because one person got his neck broken. They're like, oh shit, we got stakes now. Someone's dead. He's not. They're able to save him. But that kind of undoes what's going on. One dude did die, but it was like, okay, fine. He was weird anyway, and I didn't even know him. I don't care. Why should I care? Is that showing the prowess of this other dude? Okay, but he was just introduced. Why should I care? So, I wouldn't recommend this for like the action, the characters, or even really the plot. I mean, there's stuff going on, but it's not really enough to get you engaged, or even to have something on in the background to like distract you from something. Go find better anime to kind of there's better anime out there that you can enjoy your time with and really get into the characters, the action, and even the plots and whatnot. So I would not recommend watching this whatsoever. So those are my opinions on the anime. Tell me what you guys think in the comments below. If you liked it, if you didn't like it, if you agree with me, if you disagree with me. Also like and subscribe, and I hope you have a good day.